After a car accident, insurance companies will take every shot they can to leave you with nothing. But at Dubin Law, the game isn't over until you get the money you deserve. So call Dubin Law and add us to your roster today.
This relates to, confidence and certainty, but, really what I want for everybody is for them to be able to, especially in this social media world where they can know themselves so well that nothing anybody can say to them or things that might be done to them that are not so nice will affect them in the long term, where they can just be like, and it just bounces off of them. And I've told my kids this: listen, if you can do that, if you can do what you do, not hurt anybody in the process, and just be you, express yourself fully, and no matter what anybody says, no matter what the naysayers say, the haters, if you will, that none of that's going to affect you. You're just going to be like, you know what, just another opinion. Then you have one of the keys to success. You can rule the world with that, because there's nothing that can.
Today's guest is someone whose story hits just as hard as his roundhouse kick. You know him as Dennis de Guzman from The Karate Kid, Part 3, and now in the Cobra Kai series, but that's only one side of who he is. William Christopher Ford began martial arts at the age of 7 and is now a 5th-degree black belt in an Okinawan Shorin Ryu Karate, a lifelong teacher, and the founder of Kaizen Dojo Academy in Torrance, California. Your dojo is built on the philosophy of Kaizen, making those small improvements over time that will create a big and lasting impact, like James Clear talks about. And beyond acting and martial arts, you're a storyteller and a filmmaker who lives the mindset of continual growth and helps others build confidence, discipline, and purpose like a true instructor should. And so please welcome to the Blue Stiley Podcast, Mr. William Christopher Ford. Thank you so much for being a part of this today.
Oh, the pleasure and honor is mine. Thank you so much. どうもありがとうございます。
どういたしまして。じゃあ今から日本語だけで話しましょうか。
そう。日本語話しましょうか。
Yeah. This is the first person who's ever gone with that, and I love you. Oh my God.
Yeah, I think your Japanese is probably better than mine, but I know enough to get by. But I think for our viewers, we probably ought to do it in 英語の方がいいでしょ。
It's better to do it in English. That's right. Oh my God, I love you. That is,
よかった。
it is good. That is awesome. And the only reason I'm proficient, and I always say that I can defend myself in Japanese, is because it was one of my majors. But then I lived and worked there, and I worked at, and then I trained on the all collegiate team and the world team in karate. And so we have similar journeys. And having you has been a great grab for the podcast because I've looked up to you and I've seen you in the movies, and I've just followed your life, and you're just an amazing man. And thank you for taking a moment out of your time to be here with me today and to kind of share your story and to continue to make an impact on so many different people within your community and above and beyond with everybody else.
I appreciate you reaching out initially, and I appreciate your patience because there was a lot going on in the last year or so of my life, with my mom. Basically, I became her full-time caregiver and living at her home. So I do appreciate your patience, and now that she has transitioned, and I believe truly in a better place, and with my dad and all that, no longer suffering, my time opened up, and I was just like, I need to get back to Peru, and let's make this thing happen. So I didn't want to leave you hanging, and I don't like it when I'm just sort of ghosted, and sometimes. With all due respect, there are people in the entertainment industry who kind of big league people, and they're, unless you're somebody like who's also famous or important, they kind of shine you on. I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
I want to be respectful. I want to be of service, and give you respect. And you've given me nothing but respect. I want to give it back to you, and that's why we're here today.
Well, I am honored that you would do that. And it's like Sensei Ron Thomas and Yuji Okamoto and everyone within the Karate Kid series. And it's just like, you guys have just been this big part of my life growing up. And in a way, you've been mentors to me, even though we had never met each other. And so that's something that I want to remedy with you, because I would love to come down and meet you in person down in California. and possibly let you do a roundhouse kick to me. We could do a mawashigeri some to my head. Well,
I'll do my best.
well, I don't know about you, but it hurts a little bit more to keep up with the spring chickens. It's a little harder to go now. And you've been doing it longer than me. You started at the age of 7, long before Karate Kid came out. And what is it that drove you towards martial arts? And maybe was it something that sparked your confidence to go out and actually get into karate?
My very first influences in regards to martial arts were actually probably Japanese superhero. There was a show on called Kaida, and it was during the 70s. And it was sort of the typical, he looks like a man, but then he turns into an android. And then when he does that, he has all these amazing martial arts and acrobatic skills. And that was sort of the template for many of these Japanese superhero shows, that eventually, became like Gorenja, which, over here eventually became the Power Rangers and things like that. So I would see that. And, that was kind of like the first, one of the first influences I had. Batman and Robin, the old show with Adam West and Burt Ward, and having Bruce Lee as Green Hornet as guest. And even as a little kid, not even watching martial arts, I was like, I don't think Robin's going to be able to beat up Kato, because, I could even back then, I was like, there's a skill. There's levels to this. And that was an early influence of mine. And then later on, again, before I even studied karate, this was, the old Kung Fu show with David Carradine. And, even though I believe that was supposed to be Bruce Lee, but I didn't know any of that back then. And I just saw this dude walking around in the desert. He was beating up cowboys, and, and I was just like, this guy is awesome.
Yes.
And, my father asked me, he says, you want to learn karate? And I'm like, I don't know, a little bit. And he goes, no, a little bit. You're either going to do it or you're not, like do it or no, do or do not.
Yeah.
So try.
Yeah. There's no Yoda here. Let's be serious.
And then finally, even before I got into martial arts, my parents took me to a theme park in Buena Park, California, called Japanese Deer Park and Village, Japanese Village and Deer Park. They had recreated sort of the Japan of Kyoto, where it was sort of, like it looked like, what Westerners think of, Japan back then. And it was like they did shows, so they did like, dance shows, and there was like I think they had a dolphin show, and pearl divers would, go and pick up, open up the pearls, and you could purchase these pearls. And they had all these Japanese food vendors and whatnot. And then one of the shows that we watched was a live karate show starring Fumio Demura. And that was my favorite part of the whole experience. And that was the first time I'd ever seen karate perform live. And I was like, this guy is, wow, this guy is amazing. And, I didn't know who he was. I had no idea, but I just like, man, I really like that karate guy. That's when I was a kid, I was like, man, that guy was cool.
Yeah.
And, he was just, such an amazing, karate master, and he made the show so entertaining. It was like watching a movie, the way that he and his students performed. So, flash forward a couple of years, and there was a buddy of mine named Joseph Hiraoka. He was in school with me, and he said, hey, I just joined a karate class, and you should join too. And, he says, you're getting a little chubby, and I think you need to. And I'm like, okay. So Joe goes to tell my mom, oh, Mrs. Ford, I just wanted to let you know that I signed him up for karate lessons. And my mom was like, huh? And, oh, yeah, we started taking karate, and, I think he should go. So my mom was like, okay. And, we met the instructor, and his name was Glenn Rabago. And I got my karate gi, and that was the first experience I had with karate. And then, little did I know that would be, something that I would continue to do for the rest of my life, and actually, live my purpose through martial arts. But that's basically how I got started.
Well, I love that, because in the 70s and 80s, everyone thought Japan was going to take over the world, and everything was about ninjas and karate and all the movies. And it was like, that's what I saw. And so when I saw that, I was like, I want to be a ninja. I want to be that. And I didn't know any better either. And this is way before influencers or anything online. And anything you saw was in the movies or in comic books or in even before video games. And I just remember if you were a black belt, it meant that you were tough. And so I just knew that I wanted to be a black belt. I had no idea how hard it would be to earn a Shodan, and I had no idea the process, but I knew that I wanted to be that because I wanted to be a ninja. And so it's like, that's what I aspired to be like. And that also is what drove me to learn Japanese and to live and work in Japan and to be on the collegiate team and just like, and then start my own dojo and connect with other martial artists and mentors and senpais and kohais. And it was just like this great part of my life. And so like you, I was introduced at a very early age, but I was at 8. And it just took that little influence of seeing that. And then I met the person that changed my life, who was my instructor. And I had no idea that he was going to be that person, but that is exactly what happened with me. And for people that didn't know, you brought up Demura Sensei, and he was actually the stuntman for Miyagi Sensei in Karate Kid. And so that was kind of his part. And so he was definitely within that industry. And so he was a name brand or an image, but at our age at that time, he wasn't famous. It wasn't like, oh, but it's something that he did that clicked with you. And that's just so special.
For sure. And I got to know Sensei Demura Sensei years later. He would throw tournaments every year. And after I had been in karate for a few years, my mother was very instrumental because she didn't let me quit. I really, at some point, had said, I don't want to do this anymore. I loved my first instructor, Glenn Robago, very, very amazing martial artist, but he had a lot of demons, and he brought those demons oftentimes he brought his baggage into the classroom. And, I think hard training is good, but, especially when you're dealing with little kids, you can be negligent and abusive, and I mean in a physical way where you're just too rough. It ended up being like, he was in a bad mood, so he would make us spar him and, kicked me pretty hard in the stomach, to the point where I didn't want to cry, but I was, starting to like, I was starting to cry. And then I was like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
I'm getting beat up by my own instructor, and I'm afraid of him. I didn't like that. So the interesting thing is that his brother Richard also, he kind of co-owned the school, but only taught on Saturdays. And I love the Saturday class because Sensei Richard would push us hard, but there was always this kind spirit that you saw, and it was he never crossed the line. It was always like, he'd yell, he'd push you on, and we'd be tired, but we were loving it. And, his Budo spirit just overflowed. And that's when I said, man, I just wish he was my full-time sensei.
Yeah.
And then shortly thereafter, Glenn, unfortunately, just, he kind of went about his own way. He had a lot of things he had to take care of in his own life. And, Richard Rubago Sensei basically took over the school full-time. And that's where I started to enjoy it more. There was another instructor there by the name of Dave Liu. All of these men have passed. And Dave Liu was an assistant instructor there. And he was also a big Bruce Lee fan, and he loved boxing. So he taught me the importance of, learning how to do a good left hook, being more fluid in fighting. And I really enjoy. So there's, like Sensei Richard Rubago and Sensei Dave Liu were one of my first 2 real martial arts mentors. And that's how, through their patience with me, not being a coordinate person, being a very shy and awkward person, socially awkward, physically clumsy, not being able to really do anything, but just being able to stick with it long enough, kind of like last man standing. After a while, it's like, hey, you get pretty good just by continuing to show up and hang out and just do the work.
Absolutely. Well, you tap into something, and that is like, people ask me all the time, like they know that I don't teach publicly anymore. And they're like, do you have a good instructor? Like, what's a good school? And I always say that every school is going to be different. And just because a teacher might be bad for you, it might be good for another person, because every teacher is different. And the Japanese believe, like, if a teacher can't show their if they're not a good fit, then maybe that's not that teaching style. And in my book, I even mentioned, because it's a very similar experience, I had an instructor from a sister school who his motto was, if he hits you, it means you got to learn to duck. And I didn't like that. I was terrified of that man. But whereas my instructor was very giving and he just felt like a safe space. And I enjoyed that type of training way more than when the other instructors would come in. And I would always refer to him as like Sensei Kreese, like he was the evil Cobra Kai instructor, because he was like, he would punch you and kick you. And it was like, that's not how I like to learn. I enjoy like being around a group of people and enjoying the kata and enjoying the, when I'm rewarded of like, Blue, that was great, you know? And the hardest thing that my instructor would do would be, besides a lot of push-ups, is that he would call me out on something. And I didn't realize, like, and it took my mom to say, like, do you think he's calling you out because he actually sees your potential and he wants you to increase and be better? And that was like a little switch in my head where I was like, oh my gosh, I thought he was picking on me, or I thought I wasn't good enough, but it was in reality, he knew my potential and he was like that was the way he challenged me. And that's how he got, or that was my love language with him. And a good instructor can do that, can find that with every different child, because every kid is going to learn differently and every teacher is going to be different. And so that's something that you found. Is that something, and I want to fast forward, is that something that, because you were surrounded by different instructors, good and bad and pro and con, like, is that just something that you've been able to take and translate into you being an instructor with different kids too?
Yeah, absolutely. I've taken something from my instructors, and even the ones that I didn't particularly care for, I learned things.
Mm-hmm.
And I either learned how not to do something, or if they did something that I really did like, I can take that, flip it around, and make it work for me.
Mm-hmm.
And be able to translate that and to give that information to someone else in a way that I think works for my teaching style, and that hopefully is a good fit for whomever I'm working.
That's the greatest thing, is about having these different instructors and being introduced to different instructors and taking what works best for you, right? And manipulating. And I was always told, like, you can't do multiple styles of karate because there's only one way, and you have to designate an entire life to one discipline. But I would learn from different styles, and I would take and pick and choose different things and apply them to Shotokan karate, or something from Shotokan I would apply to my Aikido or my Judo. And it was just like, I was just this wealth of a sponge, just taking all this wealth of knowledge from all these different instructors that I was applying to myself and making me a better person. And that kind of ties into your whole Kaizen Dojo style about becoming better and actually improving yourself time over time and making these little bitty changes that are going to make your life or your career or anything like that better over time.
While I respect, the differences in styles and systems, I made an adjustment where I don't think of anything that I'm doing as a different style. It's all part of martial arts, and there are, within this big circle, different ways to move.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to say, this is this and this is that. This is like, okay, now we're working on this way of movement. Now we're working on this way of movement, and it makes it easier because now I've opened up my mind and my hearts to, and not having my own prejudice against particular, or bias against particular system,
Mm-hmm.
because of, maybe where I think it comes from, or, so on and so forth. And all of a sudden now it's like, oh, it all really fits together for me,
Mm-hmm.
and that works for me. It doesn't work for everybody. I have a respect for somebody who's stayed with us the same style, from beginning to end. There's something to be said about that too.
Yes, absolutely.
That doesn't work for me because I am always looking and exploring, and one of my things that I do in terms of my purpose here on this earth is I want to continually evolve. I want to get better so that I can serve people.
Mm-hmm.
And that means I need to be open to new experiences, new teachers, new ways of moving, new ways of thought. And maybe initially I may not get it, and I may not understand it, or I may not think it works for me, but if I give it a chance, maybe it's not the style, maybe it's me, and I need to catch up with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And you're not going to be perfect at every style, right? Like, there's going to be somebody better or stronger or faster than you. And it's like, what can you learn from that person? And what can you learn from them that you can teach to somebody else? And I think it's like we all have our own little learning style. And like I have a knee injury, so I have to manipulate the way that I move differently than someone who has great knees or who's somebody's 20 years younger. And so, but that makes me a better instructor and a better learner. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're talking about based off of your experience and making those small little changes. And I love that. What you had talked about, you got into karate and maybe you weren't the most coordinated and weren't the extrovert. And having that experience as this shy kid who got into it and maybe wasn't the best in the class, but you started to see that you were improving. How has that made you a better instructor to when you talk to kids today and you have classes with the youth? Like, how do you see a kid now and you say, don't worry, stick with it and you're going to see the end. Like, it's going to come all together in the end.
I say that all the time. The thing is that, you just keep showing up and you just do the work.
Mm-hmm.
And it may not come today, it may not come tomorrow, it may not come next year, but I see it all the time where all of a sudden this kid will suddenly turn the corner and it's like, that's it. And because they stuck with it long enough.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing. I grew up with a lot of peers, doing karate, most of them much more talented than me. And what I saw is that a lot of the kids who were naturally talented, they grew bored quickly and they gave up or they moved on to other things. And I was not allowed to do that. And I got better because I kept at it. But I have found that I can teach you how to punch and how to kick and all this. Over time, I can take almost anybody and make them physically better.
Sure.
It's just, do we have enough time? Do we have the right training method? But what I cannot give somebody is desire, the discipline. I mean, I can try to impose that on them, right? I can hopefully inspire them to be like that, through, my own passion, but I cannot give that to you. I cannot give you a work ethic. I can make you work hard in class, but if somebody can get to the point where I don't have to do that, I can help them, but they have that work ethic, that will take you farther than talent. Talent alone is not enough. I will take the kid who's willing to put in the work, but is not very talented 10 times out of 10 over somebody who's just naturally.
I love that because that is speaking my love language. And it was like, I was not the all-star quarterback and I wasn't a great baseball player. I was good enough to make the team, but I was never great. But I was really good in karate. And it was because I consistently showed up and I wanted to be there. I did not want to leave. You could not make me leave. And as an 8-year-old up until 18 years old, it was like that kind of desire to get better and train with my friends and be able to do those things. It was I think karate set me up for success in everything that I ever did because of the foundation of the drive and that intent and purpose. And even from stage, I talk to people about like, why are you punching? When you practice punching, are you practicing just to go through the range of motion and go through the actual motion of doing it? Or is there a reason behind it? And it always reminds me of Kickboxer with Van Damme when he's just running and his instructor gives him a piece of steak and hangs it on his leg and he goes, now run. And the dog is chasing him, right? Because it changes how you train. It changes what the intent and purpose behind it is. And it's like that mentality, you have to find that inside of you. It's like someone who wants to, you need to stop smoking. You can tell somebody to stop smoking. You got to stop smoking. You got to stop it. They won't stop smoking because you tell them. They have to want to stop smoking. And it's like, what is the intent and purpose behind what you're actually doing? Are you here just to go through the range of motion? Or are you wanting to learn to be better? Are you wanting to learn to protect yourself? Are you wanting to learn a certain foundation or set? And it is difficult, but when you see that spark go off in a kid's mind, it is the most amazing thing.
Yep. So 100%, 100%. And in my experience, the girls pick it up faster than the boys.
I love that.
You know,
Oh,
I, I tend to take boys at 7 and girls at 5, just because the girls are just, easier earlier on. The boys catch up later on.
yeah,
They turn 12, 13, and all of a sudden, then they think, fighting is cool. All of a sudden,
yeah.
they kind of dig it, and they kind of understand, the bunkai behind the kata, and that's a great thing to see also. But, like I used to get really hurt by students leaving. I took it personally, not, and I wouldn't be mad. I'd just be disappointed.
Yeah.
It's just, but they got so much potential, right? And then I just realized it's like, well, that's nothing to do with them. That's me, that's my ego. And I need to be happy whatever amount of time I am given with a student. And that is my honor and privilege to be able to work with somebody. That's the amount of time I got.
Mm-hmm.
And I can make even a little difference in them time. That's good. If it will help them in some way later on, then I've done what I could do.
Okay. Well, let me
And now it's like, okay, there are a few that may stay on.
yeah. Well, let me pause you for a second, and I will tell you that it's like the same with me. Like growing up and being in the dojos, you would see people come and go, and you would see, especially the elite athletes, come and try to go, and then they couldn't punch as hard as another kid, and then they would quit. And then, but it was the time that they were there. I remember those little moments. I remember their names. I remember what they did. I remember when they kicked me. I remember when I kicked them. And I remember the specific things that instructors would say. And I always took that with me, because you're right. When I have a student, and this is on anything, a client, it could be an audience or somebody who reads my book or anything. It's like I have a specific moment of time with that person. And if I can make a change, or I can do something that impacts them or makes a difference in their world, maybe that's all it is. And nothing fills my bucket more than when someone way down the line comes back and says, Blue, do you remember me? And sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And they're like, do you remember when you told me this, or you made me do this? It changed my life. It gave me the ability to go to college. I got my black belt, but in a different style. And it was all because you said this one thing. That is like and it only took one little moment of time that maybe I didn't think as a very impactful moment, but it was to that person.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. And sometimes we forget that as instructors. And, I always kind of think, oh, out of sight, out of mind, they're not going to remember me. And I'm always pleasantly surprised when I run into people, or they stop by the dojo, and I'm just like, thank you for remembering me. And they're like, are you kidding? Like,
yeah.
Of course we remember you. You impacted us in ways that you do not know. I tend to forget that. I didn't discount it. It's me. It's like, it's just me. So we can't sell ourselves short.
Mm-hmm.
We do very important work. And we're serving the people. And sometimes the thing that we think we're teaching, we're not teaching. Sometimes the thing that they're learning is not the thing they think they're learning. So there is a hidden gem in there that all of a sudden it will be opened up at one point. I'm going, oh my gosh, what? Who knew that thing that I said, maybe that I came up with, which, was sort of a random thing, stayed with somebody
for years, for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you are making that change, and you're standing out, and obviously people do appreciate you and recognize you, especially in the acting world. But it wasn't always like that. Like when you tried out for the Karate Kid 3, there's a famous story where you just got in line, and the director finally came out and was just going down what I call a cattle call in the acting and the modeling industry. It was just like, oh my gosh, just I when I heard that story of you, it's like I've been that so many times. I tried to act in LA and all over in New York, and you go to these cattle calls and you're just like, oh, it's just a number until I get cut, and it's just a matter of time until I get cut. And so the director came down, and obviously you stood out, and he remembered you. And when you gave him your resume, aka your headshot, like something stood out, right? And so you're obviously memorable, and that's a great story because it shows that that person gave you a chance and then gave you the opportunity to maybe not land the lead of the show, but as a henchman, right? And you just needed that one opportunity, and you thought that you had lost it, but in reality, you got it, and you didn't see that.
I didn't, I counted myself out for Karate Kid 3 and Cobra Kai. After Cobra Kai came out, the first season, I was getting a lot of people, hey, have you seen Cobra Kai? And what do you think of it? And I'm like, no, I haven't seen Cobra Kai. I don't want to watch that. My thing is like, here we go recycling stuff again. I'm like, I don't want to watch that garbage, and they're going, no, you really ought to check it out. And I took a look at that first episode and I went, I see what they're doing here,
Mm-hmm.
And then I started to find out more about the creators and how they were fans, and they really tried to be respectful to the original source material
Mm-hmm.
and the characters, as well as the fan base, because they're fans themselves,
Mm-hmm.
And then as I began to see this thing grow into the phenomenon, it was like pretty amazing. And I kept getting this, hey, you're going to be on Cobra Kai next season, right? And it'd be like, I have season 3. You're going to be on Cobra Kai, right? Hey, back my arm, they did a flashback. That means you're going to be in it, right? And I'm like, I don't know. They get to the point where I was just irritated with people, because it's like, as I've said before, there's a great party going on. Are you going? And I'm like, no, I haven't received. Stop asking me. It's like, I'm not invited. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
stop it. And then, they had the actor strike and the writer strike, and I heard that they already started season 6. And my thing is, look, if you don't know you're going to be on a season, you're not going to be on the seasons. It's different when you have an ongoing season, where it's like, okay, it's
Sure.
going to be on for a year. You're getting called in to do a guest star. You're going to audition for this co-star thing. But it's like, I think they already know what they want to write.
All right, so you're getting all of these, all of your friends, all of these coworkers, everybody's telling you, like, when are you going to be on Cobra Kai? When are you coming back? And you're not invited to the party.
Yeah, it's, I appreciate all the support, but after a while, it's like, no, I have not been invited to this great party. Okay. I know it's a fun party. I know, but leave me alone. I'm tired of answering that question because I haven't been invited. And, you're trying to put on a good face, but at the same time, you're going, oh man,
Why am I not invited?
So it's how I cope. And I eventually, you hear the actor strike, the writer strike, and then I hear that, yeah, they've started season 6. And, by that time, I feel, well, if I haven't heard anything by now, then I'm not going to be in this thing. They know what they're going to do. And then out of the blue, I get the call from Josh Heald, one of the co-creators, and he's asking me if I want to come back and play. So I got the invitation, and they were saying, oh yeah, we've kind of figured out a clever way to bring Dennis back into the Miyagi verse, and we'd love it if you could come back. And when they pitched me the idea that I'm still going to be bad and still working for Terry Silver, I was like, oh, I'm definitely in. This sounds like a lot of fun. And I looked at the script and said, oh, I got a rematch with Ralph. So this time, hopefully I'll get in more than just a knee and get thrown into the shelving. And it was a lot of fun to come back into the universe and the Miyagi verse and be able to play for a little bit.
Well, I think that goes to show the power of that franchise and how impactful just a story was.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not you had come back to the Cobra Kai series, it must have been amazing to be a part of something that was so full of pop culture and so many people could relate to, and people would tell you their stories of like, oh, I got into karate because of this, or I loved your character because of this. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that must have just felt amazing even before getting on to Cobra Kai.
I was always surprised that people would actually remember me from Karate Kid 3, from 1989, and 30 years later, people reaching out to me and saying, hey, really liked your work in Karate Kid 3. And I'm like, I didn't get to do much, but it still made somewhat of an impact. But I had fans reaching out to me right after Cobra Kai season 1 hit. asking me if I do autographs and sign pictures, and at that time I was like, are you sure? Because I'm no big deal, but
Yeah.
they thought I was, and I really appreciated that. So I've actually been able to make really good friends with some of the fans, some great people that
Mhm.
have supported me, have been championing for me to be on Cobra Kai. And I credit perhaps the interest from the fans and the push from the fans to keep my name in the conversation. But what I understand is, in talking to Josh and John, when I was on set, they said they've been kind of keeping an eye on me. They know, they knew they knew my character, they knew who I was, but they see that, oh, he's got a great look with the long hair now. He looks very menacing. He keeps himself in shape. He's a real karate sensei.
Mhm.
So rather than have me be showing up in a cameo, they really wanted to be able to put me in a role that was more substantial, that
Wow.
tied into the story more, that pushed the story forward more. So
Mhm.
I was very happy in how they brought me back in. They linked, me being the kidnapper and all that, and being able to give me a longer fight with Ralph and so on and so forth. So I was really happy about that. And um, the one thing I was disappointed in is that the fight that we shot was not the fight the audience got, and that typically is what happens.
Sure.
It gets edited, it gets choppy. Ralph and I both got to do more moves, and it was more even-handed. I think the way that originally it was what was shot, but they tend to overshoot things anyways so that they can edit it down, and then ultimately they have to do what Netflix wants, and Netflix wants it a certain length, and the pacing has to match the rest, not only the rest of the episode, but
Sure.
the rest of the series. So, that's just what happens. At the end of the day, I'm still very happy that I was part of that I got my rematch with Ralph. And, my job is to make him look good. He's the hero, and one, you never hit the actor. You want to make sure he stays safe, and I want to make him look good. Whether he's on the losing end or the winning end, I need to make him and the character of Daniel LaRusso look as best as they want, as good as they want to make him in that particular scene. And he
Yeah.
complimented me, because we had a rematch in another episode at the tournament, and I saw Ralph, and he says, "Mr. de Guzman." So I'm always grateful to him. I thanked him for helping me, get a line in Karate Kid 3. He championed me for that. And also, he thanked me for coming back and being willing to, do the role again. And I was thinking, are you kidding me? Thank you.
Mhm. Well,
But
and
I told him,
you're feeling appreciative and grateful.
very appreciative and grateful. And I, said, you know what? Have no fear. I am going to make you look good. And he said, you always do. And I felt that's when my heart just got warm, and I felt like, okay, thank you. Thank you, Ralph,
Mhm.
for saying that, because he acknowledged me for, doing what I do and making him look as good as he can be. And I really appreciated that.
Well, I think that goes to show that you kept up with everything, and you kept it was a part of your life. It wasn't just like a one little hit wonder, and you did that. It taught you so many different lessons to continue on and not give up.
Mhm.
And your calling just wasn't right then. It was just a certain time that was going to have to come back, and you got a bigger part because of it. And people believe you and believe in you, and obviously put themselves or put you in front of other people. And it was just like, what a great resurgence of something that has brought back so many characters, and like Yuji and Ron Thomas. And it's just like, you got it is so amazing that you're continuing, everybody's story within that is continuing to impact a whole new generation. And that has got to be a great feeling for yourself to know that. I mean, 30 years ago, you made an impact on me, for example, right? And now 30 years later, you might have an impact on my daughter, because Ron and I talked about this. It's like his daughter and my daughter, they watch the show, and it's like, it's so funny because now she's the one who's being influenced and impacted by characters like yourself.
Well, I it makes me very happy. It's funny because people have also told me, dude, you are nothing like how you come across on screen, because I look like Danny Trejo light, right? It's like, I let my mustache grow in, and I'm not
Yeah.
smiling, and I have a tendency to have this face when I'm just thinking, and it looks like I'm really angry, and I'm not. I'm just thinking about something. So I just took that and magnified it, multiplied it for the film, for the show, and it works. But
Mhm.
they're like, they say, "Yeah, man, you're a really good actor because we really hated you," and I'm like, "Oh, I don't know about that. It's just like I just don't smile very much, and then all of a sudden I come across as being menacing, and that's also challenging. Channeling the what we were taught in karate, where we were, we'd be stoic through pain, and just we're not going to show our opponent that we're hurt. We're going to be strong. And when we ki, we were very fierce. So I was just channeling a lot of that too. But I did appreciate the compliment.
Well, yeah. You've done the show justice, and everyone on board has done so, and you are continuing to make a difference in other people's lives, and not only your fan base, but then like generation to come, because I have a feeling it's going to continue to run through so many different living rooms and different people's lives, and making that difference. And so that's so awesome that you're able to do that. But you're not also you didn't just do that with acting, because you run a dojo yourself, and it's the Kaizen Dojo. And is that something that is that some chapter of your life that you want to just continue doing? And how is it that everything in all of these experiences in your life have brought you to where you are now, to where you're not maybe behind the camera making a difference, but you are inside the dojo?
The the dojo has been our bread and butter for 14 years. It's allowed us to make a living, and we're not wealthy by any stretch of the imagination, at least not in monetary terms, but we get our bills paid, we eat, we have a roof over our heads. And the dojo grounds me. I'm always going to want to work on some big shows. That's a lot of fun. But at
Mhm.
the end of the day, you need to be able to come back to the people that you or that are your people. These are the people that keep you grounded. These are the people that supported you when you didn't have the show. It's
Mhm.
always nice to, if you go to the dance with somebody, you should probably leave with that person that you arrive with. And if it wasn't for their students and their families, I don't know what I would do. They've been there when my mom passed away, and through all the time I was taking care of her, and everybody's been understanding when I've had to cancel a class sometimes because
Mhm.
my mom needed me. Um, they were very supportive when the show came out, and I didn't tell anybody, but they suspected. I said, "Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm kind of working on a show right now," and they're like, "Really?
Oh, I love that.
Gee, I wonder what show." And I'm like, "Well, I really can't talk to you about it." And they're like, "Yeah, we understand. And we've been hoping that you were going to be on that show. So congratulations."
That's awesome. Do you still have a relationship with most of the characters? Like, do you have has it rekindled friendships?
um, you know what? I was kind of brought in as a hired gun. I didn't have the advantage of being part of the cast for 6 seasons. So, those, all of those actors are really thick as thieves. They're super tight. It's
Mhm.
a family. Um, when I did come in, I I was treated very respectfully, and even warmly. Like Billy Zabka, who plays Johnny, he's the kind of guy who'll hug you. Let me get a selfie. Let me get a selfie with you, and he'll take it with his camera. And he's very warm and inviting, and he chats you up. And from my first day back on set, he greeted me, and I just felt so good. Ralph, very nice. He's much more reserved. He's more quiet. He's more conservative in that sense. But happy to see me, so on and so forth. But they're just a little bit different. They have different personalities, and I have been able to maintain good friendships with Ron Thomas,
Mhm.
Daryl Vidal, but they, we connected when even before Cobra Kai for me, because they're both legitimate martial artists, and they were martial artists. They were black belts when they were brought on to Karate Kid 1, just as I was a legitimate black belt being brought into Karate Kid 3. So there's a kinship there. There's a respect because we come from traditional martial arts, and we were already black belts before we did the shows. So there is a respect that we have. But I've kept in touch with those two in particular. Sean Kanan has been very supportive. After my mom died, he and his wife Michelle, they reached out to me and said, "Hey, we sorry to hear about your mom. Let us know if we can do anything." Yuji's very good. He lives up in Seattle, but very supportive guy, and he's one of my actor heroes because I'm Japanese and he's Japanese American. He paved the way for a lot of this stuff. Not just Pat Morita, but Yuji Okamoto and Tamlin Tomita. They're people that I look up to and I respect.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Brandon H. Lee. I interviewed him for my Beginner's Mind Journey show, and he's great. And then Brian Takahashi, he played the young Miyagi in the Dream Sequence. That's my dude. He and I are tight. So that's the guy I hang out with. And others have been very nice, and some of them I met and I haven't had any contact since, but that's just the way it goes, but I don't have any beefs with anybody, certainly, and there's no drama between me or any other cast members.
But how awesome to be a part of something that is so special and to so many people and change lives. And I told Ron that it was like my life growing up was basically the story of the Karate Kid getting beat up because of my name, right? And being a stick with lips. And I told my producer, I'm like, I remember when that movie came out because I was already training in karate. And I remember when he had his book out in the apartment that they were living in, he was practicing kicks via the book before YouTube, right? And it was like, I remember that. I remember getting books by Bill Wallace and learning how to do the splits and how to become better and faster. And it was just like all of those influences have been so amazing to me, including the negative influences. And so you were a villain. You played this villain. Kreese played this horrible instructor. And it's like, but I learned how not to act and how not to lead. And so it was interesting. And you had mentioned this. It's like you can learn just as much from a villain as you can a good guy, right? And so that's one of the coolest things. And you have this iconic pop culture character that you have, and you've done justice. And I'm so excited for you and the trajectory that your life is going, especially with your dojo now.
Well, the dojo definitely grounds me, and I like to say that my greatest teachers are my students, and that's true. And I like to joke that the number one lesson that I learned from some of my young students is patience. But, they're always bringing stuff up and looking at it from a different perspective. And I'm always open to that, and I appreciate that. You need to be open to learning from your students and from kids because they're going to be looking at it from a totally different perspective sometimes. And sometimes we get caught up in our art, and we get caught up in our titles, and we get caught up in, I'm the sensei and all this stuff. And then, you take yourself out of that and you're going, oh, you know what? Let me humble myself and, truly be humble. And, what can I learn here? How can I improve? How can I evolve? And what I want from my students is this. I want them to be, first of all, I want them to be healthy, physically, mentally, emotionally, and perhaps maybe even spiritually. That's not something that, martial arts can be a spiritual experience, but, sometimes it's just not. But definitely the first three. And I want them to be happy. And the other four things, I want them to be strong, to be safe, to be secure, and I want them to be successful. And what I mean by that is not necessarily wealthy or famous, but just finding their passion and doing what they love to do, being happy in their lives. All the other things, if they've achieved the first five, oftentimes it's like, dude, you're successful. You got it. You know what I mean? All the other stuff is gravy. And
that's golden. That's golden because as a parent, I always talk about like success is different from everybody. Success to me isn't having a private jet or to be in a private island or something. It's being able to have dinner with my kids every night or to be able to pick my kids up at school and to have them hug me and to have that relationship. Or my daughter asking me, Dad, can you show me how to do a reverse punch, right? Dad, how do you deal with this? Like that is success to me, to be able to pass that knowledge on.
Yeah.
And that's so, because you're right. It's not monetary. It's about what does success look like to every single one of those students or the people that you meet. It's different for everybody. And as long as they feel confident in that path, then they've hit it and they've done it.
This relates to, confidence and certainty, but, really what I want for everybody is for them to be able to, especially in this social media world where they can know themselves so well that nothing anybody can say to them, or things that might be done to them that are not so nice, will affect them in the long term, where they can just be like, and it just bounces off of them. And I've told my kids this: listen, if you can do that, if you can do what you do, not hurt anybody in the process, and just be you, express yourself fully, and no matter what anybody says, no matter what the naysayers say, the haters, if you will, that none of that's going to affect you. You're just going to be like, you know what, just another opinion. Then you have one of the keys to success. You can rule the world with that, because there's nothing that can hurt you, and that's, I want that for me too, because, as being human, sometimes I'm going, don't read the comments, don't go down that Reddit rabbit hole. But every once in a while you're going, oh man, they're saying that about me. Oh man, and then you realize it's like, listen, that's got nothing to do with me. That's got everything to do with them. And everybody has an opinion, and that's the filters they're going to look at things through. And sometimes they just want to troll you just to see if what kind of reaction they're getting out of people. And you can't be worried about any of that stuff. None of it's real. Truly, you need to know yourself. Once you know yourself, everything else comes easy, I think. Well, maybe not easy. It's simple. It might not be easy, but if you could just get rid of that component, man, listen, you mentioned in your book being able to go back in time and talk to my younger self, so we're going to get in the DeLorean with Doc Brown and Marty McFly, go back and visit like the younger William Christopher Ford, right? And I would tell him, dude, listen, do not buy into the lies that you believe about yourself based on a perception of something maybe your mom or dad said, that maybe they were tired, maybe they were cranky, and they're just being the best they can be in the moment. But I took that to heart, right? And I lived with that lie for decades, and it affected me. And then I realized, why am I listening to the thought I had when I was a kid? That's not valid right now. So I would go back and tell my younger self, dude,
100%.
don't do that. Listen, do this. And none of that's, and that would be the advice I give my younger self.
Oh, that hit home with me because like my uncle told me I was adopted. I thought forever I was adopted. And I was like, oh my God, I believed him. Like I legit believed him.
Oh my God.
So, but you have no idea of the power of words. And that goes on the positive side. Like you as an instructor, you as a teacher, you as a coach, as a mentor to someone, as a counselor to someone, as a leader or a boss, like your words have power, and how you lead people and how you decide to bring people up versus push them down has meaning. And it's like, you have to be careful with that. And you have done that, and you have lived this life of helping people. And I am just so glad that you have come into my life, and that I'm going to give Yuji and Ron total credit for bringing us together. But I just look up to you, and I appreciate you spending this short amount of time, because I know that your message and your message to youth, I have a feeling will resonate for many years to come, because you're a good man and your character stands forward. And I just want to be a part of that life, and you being a part of mine. And I just look forward to meeting you in person too.
I really appreciate that. I have Ron's book too. He sent one that copies me, The Hidden Lessons of Mr. Miyagi. I got it right here, as a matter of fact. And even the first chapter is worth the price of admission, because the hidden lesson that Ron says in that chapter is to serve has its own rewards. And I thought, yeah, and that's in chapter 1. That's just one of the hidden nuggets. And I'm like, you could just like take that and take it to the bank, and just run with that. And
being able to reflect on it.
Yeah, I truly believe that,
Yeah.
the word samurai, literally translated is, it's not warrior, it's those who serve, right?
Mm.
So, we are all samurai if we are in service. I like using that imagery, and just like, sensei, it doesn't literally mean teacher. It's a title given to teachers and doctors, and one could say that it means for like firstborn, or he or she who came before, and not
The
necessarily
previous
like,
student.
right?
The
So,
previous student. That's right. I love it. Well, I love you and thank you very much for being the character that you are and standing and being you,
well, thank
because
you.
I look up to that. And I look up to visiting you, and I would love to come and visit. If you invite me, I see my wife makes fun of me all the time. She's like, you always invite yourself, but I am going to invite myself to your dojo, and I would love the honor of being able to practice with you and just to get to know you on a personal level. So thank you so much for being a part of this and telling your story and to continuing to make a difference in so many kids' lives, because you're doing that, whether you're behind the screen or not.
I'm going to invite you, but I'm going to ask your wife if you can come down first. So we'll just make sure that we clear it with the boss.
Fair enough. I like that.
Yeah.
Where can people find out more about you, whether that's IMDb or where they can connect with you and find out more about your dojo?
I've got 2 Instagrams. One is at William Christopher Ford. At William Christopher Ford. That's my Instagram handle, and that's probably the best one. And as far as my dojo, you can go to kaizendojo.com. That kind of gives you the schedule. I'm in the process of sort of like putting up some new videos and revamping that. And then I also have an Instagram at the Kaizen Dojo. So I'm easy to find, and I'm always interested in meeting new friends and cool people. So that's where I'd be. And on YouTube, you can find me under Sensei Ford. If you type in like Sensei Ford, then you can find me on YouTube. I'm going to be producing more content in relation to karate and bunkai and practical application, filmed cinematically. That's what I'm looking forward to doing in 2026. And I did a show called 52 Masters that I sort of became known for before Cobra Kai. And I have another excuse for revamping that series and rebooting it, because in May of next year, it marks my 52nd anniversary of being a student of martial arts. So it's a perfect excuse to either film the lost episodes of 52 Masters or just totally do it, and let's commit to another year of interviewing 52 martial artists and just going 2.0 with it. And so that's what I look forward to doing.
I love that. Okay, well, we will definitely plug that into our list. And I am so excited to hear more about your journey in the future and the difference that you're making in this world, because you are, and the impact that you continue to make. And I'm honored that you came on today. And thank you so much for sharing just a little bit of your story, because it's going to change my life.
The honor and pleasure is mine. Thank you. And thank you to your producer for getting us through this. This was awesome experience. And I am definitely looking forward to having you come down, but you got to be willing to sit down with me and do an interview with me when you're down here.
100%. I promise you on that. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Have a wonderful day and good luck. And I'm pushing you.
Thank you.
All right.
Talk to you soon.
If this episode brings you value, or you know someone who could benefit from it, the best way to support the show is by sharing and subscribing. It's completely free and helps us reach more people. And if you have any questions, feedback, or guests you'd like me to interview, drop a comment while you're there. I'd love to hear from you. And most importantly, thank you for tuning in. And let's continue sharing optimism and positivity.